Today we are making apple pie, and what an amazing and simple recipe this is. We have some Christmas flavor going on as well, such as cinnamon and orange, and for more recipes like this, make sure you subscribe. Measure 300 grams of all-purpose flour or plain flour. For a perfect pie crust, you need the flour with low percentage of protein. That means somewhere between 8 and 10%. Sieve the flour to get rid of any impurities that might be present. Add 50 grams of ground almonds, or you can use ground pine nuts if you want to. Or if you don't want any nuts into your pie, you can simply replace this with 50 grams of all-purpose flour. Your butter should be cold before adding it into the flour. After that, to give a bit of a flavor to our crust, we're gonna be adding some orange zest. Transfer everything to the food processor, and if you don't have one, you can do this by hand. It's just gonna take slightly longer. Add 1 free-range egg yolk, together with 1 tablespoon of cold water, and basically all you need is a few pulses of your food processor in order to mix all these ingredients together. When you get to this kind of grainy consistency, you are good to go, so you can transfer everything to the same bowl you used previously. If your mixture got slightly warm at this point, you might want to refrigerate it for 10 minutes. It's really important to keep it cold during the whole process. Try to bring the dough together using your hands. You can even remove it from the bowl if you find it easier. You should get to a nice smooth consistency. I cannot stress enough how important it is to keep the dough as cold as possible during the preparation process. If the butter melts before baking, you lose the flakiness of the pie crust. On the other hand, if you keep the butter cold till it hits the oven, the steam release from that fat will help separate the crust into multiple flaky layers. Now place this into the fridge for at least an hour. There is a whole debate whether to keep your apples with the skin on or without, or which variety to use, but in my opinion, firm dry apples usually work best in pies because they soften up but they don't turn mushy when baked. Add lime or lemon juice into the water. The acid will prevent the apples from oxidizing. Today I'm using Granny Smith apples, but there are many other varieties you can consider such as Yona Gold, Honey Crisp, Pink Lady, Jazz, and so on. After peeling the apple, remove the cores, and you can either slice them or dice them, it's totally up to you, but I prefer them diced just because it's a lot easier to pour them out into the pan whilst cooking. For the size of the pie I make, you probably need about 12 to 15 apples, obviously depending on how big they are. Set a pan large enough on medium heat that can take pretty much all the apples that we prepared earlier. Caster sugar is definitely an alternative, but in my opinion Demerara works really well when baking. In this combination, get the zest from a line straight in, and we're also adding some ginger. Ginger and apples are really good friends. You don't need much because it's quite strong. Obviously, what's an apple pie without cinnamon? So you need 1 teaspoon of cinnamon that goes straight in. Go ahead with the diced apples. Add the juice from the lime we zested earlier. This will work perfectly with the sugar, giving us the best balance between sweet and sour. Toss everything together and put the lid on. When it starts boiling, reduce the temperature to medium-low and let it cook for about 7 minutes. Cook them until they get softer on the outside, but they still should have some bite, so make sure you don't overcook them. Because of the melted sugar and the juices from the apples themselves, you're gonna end up with quite a bit of liquid. This is the gold, make sure you keep it. This will go back into the pan, we're gonna reduce it down to about a quarter and it's gonna go on the pie. Set aside the diced apple and the sticky sauce. Let them cool for a couple of minutes before adding them into the pie. It's time to preheat your oven at 355 degrees Fahrenheit or 180 degrees Celsius. An hour later and our dough is ready for rolling. Unwrap it and portion it. We are using 3/4 for the base of the pie and the other quarter is gonna be used for the top. That's the working surface and the dough with plain flour. When it comes to thickness, it's all up to you, but I would recommend to go from 1/4 of an inch down. 1/4 of an inch is probably a bit too thick, but half of that measurement is probably right. I don't like my pie to be too doughy, so I keep the crust to minimum, but you can definitely change this. Dust the pie dish before unrolling the pie crust over the top. And if it happens that it has some cracks, some holes, don't worry, we're gonna fix that later. Now carefully mold the dough into the pie dish. Because of the ground almonds, as you can see, the dough is slightly more crumbly than usual. But that's a fair compromise because we're gonna get a great taste after that. Using dough that overflows the sides of the pie, you can cover the cracks and the holes. Your cooked apples should be cool enough so you can add them into the dish. Same with that syrup, and if it happens that it went too cold, just heat it up slightly. Spread it over all the surface of the pie. With this added, you have the perfect balance of moisture into your pie. not too soggy and not too dry. Continue the same rolling process you've done with the base with the top of the pie, but this time we're gonna cut the pastry into strips. You can choose the kind of crust style that you want. You can either cover the pie with a whole pastry disc and just make a few incisions into it to let the steam escape, or you can go with a lattice, something that I'm attempting to do. I'm not really good at this, to be honest, but it still looks better than nothing. I'm pretty sure you can do a lot better job than I do. You basically need to crisscross those pastry strips in a way that looks nice. So I end up with something like this, close but not really. I don't really have the patience, to be honest. Get a knife and trim the excess pastry that's peeling off the edges. And with the rest of it that comes still to the edge of the pie dish, just fold it in. It's no point leaving it the way it is because it will only burn during the cooking process. Whisk an egg with a tablespoon of water, and then use the egg by lightly brushing the top crust. This adds shine and helps the crust browning. Sprinkle some Demerara sugar on top of the pie, it will help giving a nice texture, and you're ready for baking. In the oven it goes for about 35 to 40 minutes or until the pastry is nice and golden brown on top. This is quite a good way of guessing when it's ready because the apples are pretty much done from when we cook them in a pan. I know it's tempting, but give it at least 2 hours before you dig into it. If you enjoy this content, make sure you give it a thumbs up and check other videos from the playlist Christmas at Home this year. I'll see you in the next one.